Well, I want to welcome everyone to the webinar, The Roadmap to Making Michigan the Most Physically Active State in the Nation. We're going to talk about the Michigan Physical Activity Plan today. I'm delighted to have such a broad group of people that have joined us. I think last time I checked, we had close to 86 people registered for the webinar. And if you look through the list, it was a cross-section of people from healthcare, from state agencies, from school districts, from Parks and Rec, from academia. So I think that suggests how interested many sectors are in what we're doing. So I'm very excited that you're all here. We'll be very respectful of your time today and have you out by 3 p.m. And we're also going to be recording this webinar. So you can feel free to take notes, but we're going to send the recording out to you afterwards. My name is Mike Stack. I'm going to have the rest of the panelists introduce themselves in a moment. I'm the chair of the Michigan Moves Coalition. And if you're on this webinar, you may be asking yourself, who is the Michigan Moves Coalition? And we're a nonprofit organization of physical activity stakeholder groups and other Michigan-based organizations. And we're dedicated to improving the health of everyone in the state through physical activity and movement. We have a vision of creating a healthier Michigan where all residents feel inspired to have the opportunity to be physically active. And I know that resonates with many of you that are on the webinar right now. And our mission is really to unify the physical activity community in the state to facilitate their actions and amplify their impact. And that's an important thing I'd like to start with is we're not here to reinvent the wheel. We fully realize as a coalition that many of you that are listening, the panelists that are on this webinar, there's already great work that's going on in the state. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to help provide some guidance, some structure so we can really amplify things and improve the health of people in Michigan through movement and physical activity. And we're also a group that is about action. Myself, Dr. Deb Berkey, and Tony Moreno, about 3 years ago, Tony's a member of the Governor's Council on Physical Fitness. We all came together and we said, hey, we needed to get this thing started, but we also wanted to be clear that we were about action, not just writing a white paper and setting it on the shelf. Now, ironically enough, we're starting this conversation with talking about writing a white paper, but from there, we're going to move to implementation pretty quickly. So I'm very excited to have our group of panelists. As I said, coming off the webinar, you're going to get a recording. We're going to send that out to all the participants. I would encourage all of you, if you haven't already been, to go to our website, which is mimoves.org, for you to find out a little bit more about the coalition and the work we're doing. But kind of as I said in the open, our goal here is to amplify the work that's happening in the state. And to do that, we need a plan. And kind of the failing to plan is planning to fail kind of notion. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this webinar, the development of a Michigan physical activity plan. There are a couple states who already have plans developed. Texas has a state level plan. West Virginia has a state level plan. I believe Kansas City also has a city level plan. And so we're looking to somewhat follow in their footsteps, but we're also looking to be heavy on the implementation component. And so we're going to talk about that in various facets today. There will be some time for Q&A at the end, and certainly there'll be the opportunity to send us questions and to correspond after the webinar. So with that being said, I'd like the panelists to take a moment to introduce themselves, just so you have some context. These are members of the Michigan Moves Coalition Board of Directors who have spent a lot of time building this coalition and working together on this, and I'm very excited to have all four here. I should also mention that I mentioned Tony Moreno earlier. He's not on the webinar just for sake of brevity, but Tony, who I know is listening, was a big part of this work. So with that said, I'll have the panelists introduce themselves just briefly so we can get into this. We'll start with Ashley Bradshaw.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ashley Bradshaw. I am the physical activity consultant within the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So my role within the department is really just to manage our portfolio of projects that focus on increasing access to physical activity opportunities throughout our state, ultimately coming from the health department and a public health lens with decreasing chronic disease rates throughout our state, and ultimately, increasing the physical and mental health of Michigan residents. So I'll kick it to Deb now.
Yes.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm Deb Berkey. I am the Executive Director of the Society of Health, Physical Education, and Recreation. Well, excuse me, to get that recreation off of there. It's Shape Michigan. I am a professor emeritus from Western Michigan University, and I have been involved with physical education, well, all of my life, but I've been a practitioner, I've been a leader, and I am delighted to be a part of this coalition and speak with you today. And I will kick it off to Karen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Pfeiffer. I'm a professor in the Department of Kinesiology at Michigan State University. In addition to that, I'm the director of the Institute for the Study of Youth Sports. And I just finished a term as the chair of the sports sector of the National Physical Activity Plan, and now am serving as the chair-elect for the National Physical Activity Plan. So I'm spending a lot of time in physical activity planning space, and I'm very excited that we're taking this leap forward to do something specific for the state of Michigan.
Thanks.
I guess I'm kicking it to Nicole.
Thank you. Hi, Nicole Fisher with MParks, affectionately known as the Michigan Recreation and Park Association. We are the voice of parks and recreation community in Michigan. We have over 2,000 members who represent and drive Michigan's parks and recreation industry, including professionals, agencies, universities, ally members, students, retirees, and organizations. And we're super happy to be here on this call today. Back to you, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. And my name is Mike Stack. As I said, I'm the chair of this coalition, and I represent the Fitness Club Association. So the Michigan Fitness Association represents the close to 3,000 fitness clubs in the state. I'm an exercise physiologist by trade and training, and I'm a faculty lecturer at the School of Kinesiology at the University of Michigan. And I'm really excited to have these four panelists with us, and particularly I think it's noteworthy Ashley being here on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services. Certainly, if this is going to be a successful initiative and we're actually going to make a true impact in the communities in the state, we need that support from MDHHS, and I'm very excited that the department realizes that it's important for Ashley to be spending her time with us. And that's actually where we're going to start the conversation today, with the perspective of the Department of Health and Human Services. Ashley, for you, why is developing something like this plan so important for MDHHS?
Yeah, I think there's so much incredible work happening throughout our state around physical activity. And so I think having a comprehensive plan can really help strengthen the already existing work that's happening, but also really start to show the opportunities that we have for future collaboration and future, for growth throughout this work. So I think to start to map out what's already existing and where those areas of opportunity are key. But then I also think building out a comprehensive plan really gives us an opportunity to bring in people who we don't consider traditional partners in this space. A lot of our efforts within, MDHHS recently around physical activity has been partnering with the Department of Transportation. And I think for sometimes you're like, well, why would transportation really have any role within this physical activity work? But when we start to think about like our environments that we live in and access to physical activity, the infrastructure that MDOT is building is key for that, right? Our sidewalks, our bike lanes, and spaces, and building those active communities so that physical activity becomes just natural throughout our everyday and is accessible within our environment. And so I think when we think about this plan, there's, two huge opportunities. Bring those together who are already doing this work to start to have that collective impact and that growth that we're looking for, but then also start to bring in folks that we normally don't have part of that conversation. So I think it's really, an opportunity overall just to build this movement throughout our state, start to leverage, the thousands of miles of trails, the hundreds of parks that we have. And so really, and you'll see from all of the people that we have on the panel today, there are so many different spaces that physical activity has an impact in and touches within. So this plan really gives us the opportunity to bring everyone together and start to make the case for why physical activity is so important for both our physical and mental health. So that's really, for us, what is the most exciting part about this.
Awesome. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. It's just broadening the tent of all the people that can be involved in physical activity in all the different sectors, which kind of allows me to turn to Karen to give us a little bit of education on kind of the structure and the approach here. So, in the interest of not making this, too academic after the school year has ended, I think we do have to get into a little bit of the academic nuts and bolts. So, Karen, this is going to be structured after the national plan general framework, which takes a sectorial approach. So why don't you explain the general sectorial approach and kind of the general approach to developing this kind of plan?
Yep, thanks, Mike. So I think it's important for everyone to initially recognize as well that the National Physical Activity Plan was created to go hand in hand with our National Physical Activity Guidelines. And so the first release of the guidelines was in 2008, at least in our country. And then we had an update in 2018. And so the guidelines are there for all segments of the population. And we have, varying recommendations depending on age group and demographic. And so that can be seen in our actual physical activity recommendations. And then the plan was developed as a means to help us think about how we might achieve getting everybody in the United States to meet the guidelines. So in the US, the overall National Physical Activity Plan is set with some overarching priorities of, what is important to us, which is really getting everybody moving at the end of the day. But then there are strategies, tactics, and objectives that have been created. And then they've been created specifically by 10 different sectors. And so in the national plan, the 10 different sectors: industry, community, recreation, fitness and parks, education, faith-based settings, healthcare, media and communications, military settings, public health, sport, and then transportation, land use, and community design. So those are the 10 sectors. And, we have these strategies, tactics, and objectives kind of meant to be a roadmap for getting everybody across the US to be physically active. So the way, Texas and West Virginia have set up their plans kind of follows that. And I would imagine we are still in conversation and we're still developing the Michigan plan, but I think we will be taking a very similar approach where we will be looking for folks who are interested in representing various sectors to let us know that, so you can help craft and create what we do. Initially, the National Physical Activity Plan was not as much about implementation as it was about providing a roadmap to follow. And we are kind of turning the conversation. We're about to engage in some strategic planning for the national plan, and we will probably turn to a little bit more of an implementation-based approach as we go forward here. So a lot of us are very action-oriented on in the Michigan Moves Coalition and on this board. So I think that we probably are going to be quite implementation-oriented when we devise all of our strategies, tactics, and objectives for all the different. We also have to keep in mind as we're devising our plan that we would like to be able to keep track of how well we're doing and if we're achieving this plan. And so as we are creating those strategies, tactics, and objectives, we want to make sure that they are measurable so that we know, and I'm sure Ashley and her crew are going to be, very interested in seeing how our progress goes. So those are the types of things that we will keep in mind, but we will probably have a very similar format to the national plan, but of course, tailored very much just to the state of Michigan and things that matter here to those of us who reside in the Mitten.
Awesome. Thank you. And we will share out the national plan and some links after the Physical Activity Alliance link. I sit on the board of directors for the Physical Activity Alliance, and that the National Physical Activity Plan is one of the Alliance's assets. So we'll share that out so everyone can get a better idea. But, you know, as the saying goes, all health is local. And I think that that's where we have a real true opportunity here to make an impact. And a number of you that are listening to this webinar right now are in local communities day in and day out, and you're making an impact on the public health of your community through movement. And so we need to leverage that, and we need to organize that. And that kind of brings me to, I guess, the people that are working more on that tactical level, Deb, Nicole, and myself. So we each, the three of us, represent three prominent physical activity organizations. Now, the thing that I think Ashley and Karen framed up really well is that this plan is meant to cast a much wider net. I mean, you heard Karen talk about the sectoral approach. You know, really, Deb, Nicole, and myself represent one of the 10 sectors. So there's 9 other sectors that are out there. But as the kind of the big 3 physical activity stakeholder groups, you know, we play an important role of this. And Deb, I want to start with you, and then we'll go to Nicole, and then we'll throw it back to me for each of us to touch on why our various organizations feel that it's important to be a part of this plan.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks to everybody else. Well, Shape Michigan is dedicated to providing programs, products, and services that promote the pursuit of healthy, active lifestyles. Our members are primarily K-12 health and physical education teachers who are responsible for providing a local program that allows students to develop physical skills, knowledge, and personal social attributes that increase the probability, because that's all we can do, that they will develop habits that will foster their optimal development. We believe that these habits must be intentionally taught, not caught accidentally or by chance, and it needs to include everyone because all of us are in this together. For 12 plus years, the child is guided toward lifestyle choices. And because we're K-12, we get them first. I mean, you might get them a little bit in the parks before, and the families get them a little bit, but hello, preschool, knock, 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 here they are, and they're coming to us. So we believe that meaningful physical activity is critical. The CDC recommends that children 6 through 17 engage in moderate to vigorous physical activity each day. And so we need to guide them to figure out, well, what does that really mean? And we choose to say to all of you, the opportunities aren't all going to be in a physical education class. They're going to be throughout the day. So their opportunities will not occur in a vacuum. So we try to use the Comprehensive School Physical Activity Program as a template. And that template provides us 5 components. We're into numbers, so let's think about that a little bit, because it's not all going to happen just in the physical education class, and it can't happen in silos. So if you're talking about those 5, we are responsible for a high-quality physical education program, and we have to have the opportunity to do that. And our legislation doesn't lend itself very well to that, but don't get me off on that part. It's also, so 1, physical education, high-quality physical education. 2, physical activity during the day in classrooms or on the playgrounds, wherever. Physical activity before and after school. We need to have staff involvement so we're all on the same page and not little itty bitty. I'm running the jump rope for heart over here, and you're running impact or whatever. All of us in the same, in having the same mission and having the same, providing common activities, or at least common conceptual activities for our students. And finally, community engagement, because we can't do this without the community. We can't do this without buy-in. But I'll tell you what, I can think of 1 million plus reasons that Shape Michigan believes that our involvement is crucial. And by the way, I got that because in 2022, there was 1,144 students enrolled in a total of 2,595 schools in 539 districts, if you're into numbers. My point is to prepare our students to be responsible adults who understand that their health must be a personal responsibility. Education must be well-rounded and include physical activity across those 5 spaces that I was talking about. We believe that physical educators should lead this effort in schools, working collaboratively with colleagues, administrators, legislators, the communities, and parents to impact the lives of children to set them up for success. So we want to be an integral part of the team that positively changes the lives of students and improves the health of Michigan and the Mitten, whichever hand I'm supposed to use. Thank you very much.
Well said, Deb. Thank you. And Tony Moreno talks a lot about physical literacy, and quite often, we think of literacy and numeracy in schools as being, a critical thing, and we could never imagine our children growing up to, not have, literacy and the ability to do math. Physical literacy is every bit as important, and that's a lot of what, Deb and her colleagues are stewarding in their role as physical educators. Nicole, you and MParks are another big part of, the community. I know I believe you're in the first 12 months of your tenure as the ED at MParks. So although you're new into this, you've embraced your role on the coalition right away from your handoff from Clay Summers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, your group and why this is important for you to be here?
Well, it definitely aligns with our mission to promote health and wellness and community engagement through parks and recreation. So our outdoor spaces serve as natural settings for people to come and live and promote active lifestyles, whether it's walking, jogging, cycling, team sports, and other recreational activities. We have a unique opportunity and responsibility to play a pivotal role in fostering this movement statewide. Also, MParks can leverage its expertise and resources. Our parks and recreation professionals know the community better than anyone and know the resources that we have and who we can help. We serve as essential hubs for promoting active lifestyles. People in Michigan are living in their parks. They live in their communities. And so we provide accessible spaces for individuals and families to engage together in these recreational activities.
You said it on the natural resources. That is one thing. I mean, you don't have to look much further than the background behind you, which we're going to say is Michigan, even if it's not, to say we have some amazing, areas here in the state that really allow us to be, physically active through most of the seasons. And so, much like, Deb and Shape, MParks, and their work, the Michigan Fitness Association, we're a newer trade association. We started in the beginning of COVID. There was no trade association for the fitness clubs in the state until May of 2020, and some great colleagues started it before I got involved. And really what we've come to realize in redefining our industry coming out of the pandemic is that, just like Parks and Rec, we're a critical part of the public health infrastructure. We are a critical community resource. We have almost 3,000 clubs in the state that are in every zip code and every community. We're almost an $800 million industry in the state. So not only do we have the physical footprint, but we also have the financial resources that we can bring to bear as a for-profit type of an entity, which, Nicole and Deb don't necessarily have the luxury of having extra profits to turn over to initiatives. I think our industry is very, very well positioned just from a physical infrastructure perspective. And then the other element that I think makes our industry really well positioned to be a part of this coalition is the ongoing professionalization effort that's happening within the exercise profession. And those of you that aren't acquainted with what's happening in the exercise profession, there's a movement towards highly qualified exercise professionals becoming qualified healthcare providers. And that's a very exciting opportunity for us to be able to collaborate between clinic and community and all these other resources that are out there for physical activity to coordinate the physical activity of the population in the state. So I think, much like MParks and Shape, the Michigan Fitness Association can utilize its footprint and its resources to be the implementation arm of the plan. And I think that's kind of what I want to frame up here. We have, Ashley, a public health expert. We have, Karen as a researcher and someone that's involved in physical activity planning. They're not going to be on the front lines doing the implementation. They're going to help to develop the framework. And then it's groups like the fitness clubs, MParks, SHAPE, the APTA, the physical therapist. I see Edward, who's their executive director. He's on the webinar, and all the other groups in the state that are in the communities on the ground level at the front line doing that work. So although you see 3 organizations represented here in MParks, SHAPE, and the MFA, we need to keep broadening that tent to get more and more organizations involved, so we can be very focused on the implementation and measurement element of this. And Karen said it earlier, we are a very action-oriented group by our nature. That I think that's just physical activity people in general. We like to move, and but we also want to be able to measure our impact. So with that said, Karen, I'm going to turn it back to you. And I want to kind of move this more towards a tactical discussion here. Of what we need in terms of resources to author and to implement the plan. And I'm not looking for you to get really granular here, because I think we're still building the bridges, we're crossing it to a certain extent, but help everybody understand, like, okay, you got this great idea of a plan. How do you actually turn something out that's on paper?
Mike, I think it's a great question, and I'm not 100% sure I know the full answer to that either. But one thing that I do know is you have already mentioned, as have others, during the course of this webinar, the fact that the community input and involvement is going to be so important. And I can't stress that enough. So everybody who is viewing this live or later down the road, we want input. We need input from everybody, from all the different sectors. We need ideas. We need to know what you think is important. What do you think are priorities for those of us here in the state of Michigan? With respect to our physical activity, we do not want to be in a silo over here, just developing something that no one actually wants to do. That's is we want things to happen. We want people moving. We want to figure out the best way to do that for everybody in the state. And if that's the case, everybody needs to hop on board. And so if you know some folks who would be interested and they're not here on the webinar today, contacting us and letting us know you would like to be involved in creating elements of the plan and or implementing aspects of the plan would be great for us, because it's going to take a lot of people. It's going to take a lot of collaboration. And I think, creating strategies, tactics, objectives that are the actual plan might be a little bit easier, especially if we've got, some good input. I think the implementation is where we really are going to need a lot of outreach and help. And, I think there are things that we can do, such as hold some meetings where people come together and we actually discuss these sorts of things. Now, in order to do things like that, we do need the kind of resources that are not just person-based, but financially based. So I think that we will be, reaching out to some partners to do things like that. But I think bringing people together as much as we can, whether it's online or in person, I think will be very useful to us. And I think we need to figure out a public forum where we can put ideas out there. The federal government has the Federal Register, and maybe people don't even realize what the Federal Register is or that it's out there. But all the things that the federal government does, they put out on the Federal Register for comment. So it would be nice if we had some sort of a similar system here, like a state register, where we can get word out and we can get feedback from people, even when we create the plan itself, and any ideas that we would have moving forward. So I think input is just going to be probably the most important thing, and let us know what it's going to take to get buy-in, because, everybody here needs to be first of all, bought in, but secondly, be willing and able to reach out to others, you know, who would be interested in this movement and to get everybody engaged. And we want to listen to all the voices the best we can.
Yeah, I want to double click on something that you said there that I think is really important. And I appreciate the candor on us not exactly knowing what the steps are. I do think we know the steps to write a plan. That's been fairly well documented right now. What has not been done, and I think is the unique opportunity here, is the implementation and the surveillance piece. And that has not been done, as you said, Karen. The national plan is considering that. But at the national level, there's some challenges and some hurdles to that. Other states, I don't think, have brought together as broad of a coalition as we've brought together here. So I think we have this really unique opportunity here to do something. But to your point, it's going to take collaboration. It's going to take passionate advocates. At the end, we'll give you some ways that you can reach out to us and engage. But we will be entering into the process of strategic planning here very, very soon. In fact, the board has a kind of a template document that I sent them over the weekend. And so we're about to start this work, and we would love for everyone here to be on the ground level with us. I don't know, and no one here knows exactly what the answer is, but I think we have a very strong vision for what we want to achieve, and that's making Michigan the most physically active state in the country. And I think if we continue to keep that as our North Star, that's going to allow us to find the answers as we go. So I appreciate that insight. I want to turn back to Deb, Nicole, and myself here to keep this moving on. And I think I'd like each of us to provide a little bit of a call to action to our constituents. So to the physical education teachers, the parks and rec professionals, the people in the health and fitness industry. What would we like each of our colleagues to take away from this discussion? So Deb, we'll start with you again. Speaking right to your physical education colleagues, what would you consider their actionable takeaway and next steps from this discussion?
Thing number one, get involved. If you're at the table, they talk with you. If you're not at the table, they talk about you. Sorry, that's how it works. So get involved. As usual, I'll have a couple step answer to this, but number one, educate. Make sure you use the terms physical literacy. Make sure you understand the comprehensive school physical activity program and you're reaching across for those, and don't be a silo. And please, please try to make sure that you understand where that fits in whole school, whole child, whole community, whole child. Make sure we've got those things at our disposal already. We need to use those and leverage those. So educate. Two, advocate. Again, get involved. If there's supposed to be a school wellness committee at your school, make sure you're there. If you're not there, make sure somebody represents you. Because like I said, if you're not at the table, well, you've given the opportunity to somebody else. So we can't wait for that. We must advocate for ourselves. Recognition. If you are already measuring moderate to vigorous physical activity, a lot of you are doing grants or you're doing opportunities. If you know the impact of your program, make sure you share that, because that's going to be something that we're going to be looking for, and at least I'm going to be looking for while we're working with this coalition, because numbers talk, whether we like it or whether we don't. And finally, succeed. Show us the way. Make sure that you're walking the talk and you're talking the walk, okay? Because if I am not demonstrating and trying to be exemplary of this, then it doesn't seem to be very important. So give your program ears, educate, advocate, get that recognition so all of us can succeed. And that's what I would say to every single one of you. If you're standing in my basement, which is where I am right now, not out by Lake Michigan, which is in Michigan, by the way. These were taken right off the beach, but we can do it. We can do it if we work together, no silos. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Back to you.
You can tell Deb's educator background with her bullet points. I appreciate that. Nicole, tough one to follow.
I'll do my best. So at MParks, our 4 pillars are to advocate, teach, inspire, and unite. And they correlate exactly what Deb had talked about. But within our profession, that's what MParks does for our professional Parks and Recreation professionals. And so I think that can align exactly with the activity plan is we have to be an advocate. We need to teach, inspire, and unite our community members to do the same. I think we can develop and implement community-based physical activity programs with other stakeholders. So we need to unite with local health departments, schools, any of those groups that they're working with within their community to advocate for this fitness and health within our parks and our community centers. You know, Parks and Recreation is the fabric of community life. And so if we can just get that message out and bring more people to the parks, or they continue to come to the parks and community centers, we definitely will reach our goal.
Awesome. Well, both of you said something that I think the fitness industry learned in stark relief during COVID about advocacy. And Deb, I'm going to say it a different way than you said it, but it's kind of the same notion. If you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu, right? And that's a lot of what advocacy turns out to be. And certainly the health and fitness industry in the state found that out in very real terms during COVID. So to my colleagues that are listening to this, I would say first and foremost, we have to broaden our perspective in terms of who we serve beyond the traditional 20% of the market. The health and fitness industry over the course of decades has done a great job of getting the fit fitter and the healthy healthier. And we need to broaden the people that we work with. We have to professionalize as an industry, and I think that is happening. So I think my actionable takeaway for all of the fitness industry stakeholders on this is to, broadly speaking, find a way to improve the health of your community beyond the four walls of your brick and mortar facility, beyond just the people who pay your membership dues, realizing that, you know, the students that are in the classrooms that Deb's colleagues are working with, and the kids and the parents that are in the community sport leagues are developing a level of physical literacy that eventually becomes the members of the health and fitness clubs that we all work in. So I think that is, you know, my big takeaway is that, you know, we need to support these other groups that are getting people from, you know, no or little activity to a little bit more activity. And then eventually they become the paying members that work with us that drive our businesses. But we have to get out from the four walls of our facility. And I think this is where I'm so excited about the coalition, because, you know, our industry's traditionally been within our four walls. I think all the other sectors have kind of been in their silos. And that's really what this conversation is about. It's about breaking down silos. It's about working together. It's about leveraging the great resources we have. There are things in the fitness industry we will never be able to do that physical educators and parks and rec professionals can do. But there's also things that we can do that they can't do. And then all the other groups in the 9 other sectors that we've talked about can do tremendous things. So this is where I think we just have this opportunity for tremendous, you know, collaboration. And I think, you know, that's what I'm most excited about. And I hope, you know, all of you that are listening to this webinar, either recorded or live, are equally excited about is just this opportunity to have all the right people around the table to actually push this forward. So Ashley, I want to turn it back to you for the final question before we wrap it up with some Q&A and some concluding thoughts. But you're the representative from the state of Michigan on this panel. And so ultimately, what's your hope for this? Like, as speaking on behalf of MDHHS, what do you hope this physical activity plan, and maybe more broadly, this coalition, will do for the state?
Yeah, you know, and I touched on this briefly earlier on, but I think what we're most excited about and our vision for all of this is really to serve as a roadmap for all of this work that's happening across the state. You know, as I'm listening to Deb and Nicole and Karen speak, you can see how many different areas of physical activity there are throughout our state, how many different sectors, organizations who are focusing on this work. You know, so as I mentioned earlier, bringing that together, I think, can really help, you know, Mike, as you were saying, have that collective impact, start to collect that data that we really need to help support the work that we're doing, you know, leverage more funding. And then another piece that I really started to think about as I was listening to Karen was thinking about how, yes, we want to create this roadmap and this higher level vision for this work, right? We want to say, you know, as a state, we're having this impact in the physical activity space and we're creating access in, you know, XYZ areas. But I think we also really want to empower the communities who historically have been doing this work for decades and ensuring that, yes, we want an overall vision for our state, but we still want our communities to have the power and the vision that is unique for theirs. Because some of, you know, the needs that we have in the physical activity space in northern Michigan are very different than we have, you know, in the east side and west side, and even from neighborhood to neighborhood, it differs. So I really think that high level vision is key, but then also figure out as a coalition and as a plan of how can we leverage this plan to begin to empower communities to build out their visions, but then also how can we support them? How can we help them leverage funding? You know, as a state agency, we've just become recipients of the CDC SPAN grant, so the State Physical Activity Nutrition. And I just think of a plan, when you have a plan like this, it really gives us the opportunity to plug that funding into the areas and already have a pulse on what that work is. We also have 3 other health departments and organizations throughout our state who are CDC grant recipients. So the work is happening, the funding is coming in, but it really is just about kind of bringing it all together and ensuring that it stays, you know, within the communities and the support comes from us. So I really think that's what's most exciting, is having that collective interest and really that overall impact as a state. Because I think that's what's been, you know, lacking historically, is just having an idea of what's going on throughout, you know, every county, every city, every community. So that's really what we're excited about and why we're glad to be a part of this work.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned, and you know, Karen touched on it as well, is, you know, we're far from having all the answers. We want to be a convener, we want to be a collaborator, but you know, to your point, what's happening in, you know, the inner city of Detroit from a physical activity perspective is different than what's happening in the tip top of the Upper Peninsula, and we need local community leaders to be having conversations with us and providing the information we need to be effective as a coalition. And that's why we chose the word, you know, coalition. You know, this is meant to be a continually growing coalition of groups. And yes, we've assembled what I think are some critical groups right off the bat, but this needs to grow to be much broader, to do the things that Ashley was just talking about. So I think the opportunity here is really tremendous. And I think we also have the opportunity to be a national model here. I mean, ultimately, no state has really implemented and measured on a broad basis the physical activity initiatives in the state. And so, you know, my hope is that we can have a ripple effect with what we're doing here in Michigan out to the other states around the country. So I appreciate everybody's insight. And I just, so our audience is aware, you know, our expert panelists could talk about any one of these things for hours on end, but you know, we're respectful of everyone's time on a Monday afternoon. So I want to open it up to questions, and I'll ask everyone to use the Q&A feature for questions. So you should be able to find that on the bottom of your screen. There was one question that came in earlier, and I will let whoever wants to take the first stab at it go for it, because I think it's a really important question. I know there's been conversations with it around the national plan, but in addition to the sectors, what are the plans? What are the plans to engage more grassroots community members? And this is, I think, the key piece. People who are disproportionately experiencing health disparities in the plan development process. So, you know, what about the health disparities piece? And we might not have a perfect answer for this, but does anybody want to take a stab at this?
I'll jump in and take a start, and I'm sure others want to jump in as well. But the way I see this happening is, first of all, I think that I'll be pretty involved with writing our plan. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is ensuring, whether it's in the overarching priorities or whether we make it happen in very specific strategies for each sector that we write, First of all, we want to make sure that we are attending to issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our plan development. So I see that as, first of all, we're gonna have to author some actual strategies, tactics, and objectives that attend to that. But secondly, we will need, as we mentioned, this outreach. And so folks who are tuned in, some of us are tuned into certain groups based on, different kinds of work we do. We have, researchers, we have people out in communities doing programming. So I think the input from people who are actually doing these things is going to be really helpful to us as well. But I think we need to include that very explicitly and specifically into our actual plans for what we're going to do.
Like, if I might, there's a couple of things. First of all, we have to listen very intently, but we also have to listen intentionally. And so in my area, for example, we have adapted physical education, and we work with unified sports, and we work with Special Olympics, and we work with all students. And so a little bit ago, I mentioned the school wellness committee. That what I'm getting around to is there are vehicles, there are structures in place that if we utilize those structures to gather input, we could be a little bit more intentional and systematic about that. But I bring that up because we're K-12, Shape Michigan is, as well as we have teacher preparation programs that we can utilize some input from those as well. But what I'm getting at is that we have people we can ask. We just have to be intentional about how we collect that information. But we're including everyone that we possibly can, including the tangent groups. Like I see John's on here. We have Blind Rehab involved with some of the things that we're doing. So we have, unfortunately, I think that there's some silos to this that I mentioned before, and we're going to work really hard to break those silos down and intentionally get the information that we need to have an effective action plan and not a talking plan, right, Karen? So just mentioning you because you get to write it and the rest of us get to work it. So just being ornery now. I'm done. Thanks.
Karen won't be the only one to write it, just to be clear. So Karen's not going to take on the academic work for all of us here, but.
And I need help from everyone who's on this webinar and beyond, so.
I think that, the being intentional, I think is really important, and have it being, baked in, from the outset of this process, I think is so important. So I want to move on to a couple more questions here. Joe asks, what are the target groups or associations that should be involved in this organization? I guess I'll answer, quickly right off the bat, and I'll just say everyone, but I will be a little bit more specific. If you think of the sectorial approach, again, there's the business and industry sector, and they have a tremendous influence on the health and the well-being of their employee population. Think of all the big employers in the state, Ford Motor Company, GM, Stellantis, you go down the list. The healthcare community can play a very, very powerful role. We have, the 4 major health systems here in Michigan. I know we have some representatives from Trinity Health and from Henry Ford Health System that are on the webinar today. They all have, a community benefit that they need to be offering in addition to their healthcare, and the faith-based sector, and it just goes on and on and on and on. So I would almost turn that question on its head and say, is there any group or association that shouldn't be involved with this? We probably don't want the Tobacco Association involved, maybe, but apart from that, every group can be involved and engaged with this in some way. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they want to add on to that, but we want as many people under the tent as possible.
Yeah, and I touched on this earlier as well, but just thinking about those who are untraditional partners, so those who probably don't see themselves as part of this work, it's very likely that they are. I just think about even, Deb's work about building physical activity within schools, but then also thinking about how our how are kids getting to schools? How are they walking there, biking there, if they even are? And so I just, to go back to what I was saying is the transportation space and just those untraditional partners, I actually think sometimes might be the key to filling those gaps that we do see in this space. So, similar to what Mike was saying, I think we're at a stage that there's really no one who shouldn't be a part of it. So yeah, any interest or I think anybody could be really helpful for us.
Thank you, Ashley. And I think that's the exciting thing about this is, our goal here is to make, the active choice, the easy choice. That's what we're looking for. And I'm going to be really biased with this statement, but I at least think the group in front of me will agree with my bias on this statement, is that on a minute by minute basis, I don't think there's anything more beneficial you can do for your health than physical activity. Like if you think about it, the CDC's guidelines are 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity every week. I challenge you to find a health behavior that you can only engage in for 150 minutes per week that would confer that kind of benefit. If you only eat healthy for 150 minutes a week, if you only sleep well for 150 minutes a week, that's only going to give you a minimal health benefit. Now, I realize I'm probably being a little bit hyperbolic here, but the point is that we know if we could just get people, the vast majority of the population that are doing little to no physical activity, to do a little bit more physical activity, that like nothing or very little to just something, that's where the biggest health benefits are really conferred. And to Ashley's point, it's, these other sectors that are just kind of baked into our day, transportation and school and all these other things, that if we can make the active choice the easy choice in those environments, it makes a profound difference. So we want everyone's involvement. And I think that speaks to the need for everyone who's on here to be advocates, to reach out, because we don't know everyone that should be involved, but all of you know people and they know people. And that's how you build a movement of movement, is by getting the word out there. And so John asks, Ashley, you talked about untraditional and innovative partnerships. Have you engaged with the mental health community? Have they been open and receptive to physical activity, physical literacy as a treatment for mental health? Would love to hear from the panelists on any level of collaboration. So Ashley, I'll direct that to you. But before I say that, we know that physical activity is amazing for mental health. So you want to comment on John?
Yeah, I can't say we've done in any sense like a direct partnership in terms of any sort of like mental health organizations or anything like that. I mean, as Mike was just saying, we're always advocates for how much physical activity can improve your mental health, and specifically getting outside can improve your mental health. So I feel that's something we're always advocating for in this space, that it's no longer just about your physical health, right? It's about connecting with your communities, improving your mental health. I mean, that is something that was significantly highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Was getting outside of the four walls of our home that we were always in. So I can't say in terms of like collaborations with actual organizations in that space have happened, but I honestly think that's the way some of this work is moving, especially in the public health space. Really the focus on, Mike had mentioned like the amount of minutes, the amount of steps. Like I feel like there used to be such a heavy emphasis on that. And it really starts to alienate people from engaging in physical activity, right? Like if you're thinking, well, I only get 2,000 steps, so what's the point? It's no longer about that, right? It's about getting started, and just having those little increments of improvement can make a vast difference on your mental and physical health. So I'm glad that was brought up, because I think that's an area for opportunity. And when we're, that question was just previously asked about who should engage. I mean, that's a sector that probably should be brought into these conversations in this work. How can those collaborations happen? So hasn't happened to date, but it is really something that we emphasize and know is important in this space.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's the opportunity here, the opportunity for, all the different sectors to get involved. And, John, I know you well, and I know we've talked about some different things that could be tried, but I think that that's the amazing opportunity here. Well, we're almost coming up on 3 o'clock, so I want to bring the conversation to a close. I see there was a question about where we can obtain everyone's contact information. We're going to be sending out information afterwards to all the attendees that will provide you information that will allow you to get in touch with us. I'll also link to a recording of this webinar. I think, before we bring it to a complete conclusion, I first want to thank all of our panelists for being on here today. I think this shows you kind of the depth and breadth of experience and knowledge that the coalition has built thus far. And not only that, but the attendees being from such a broad variety of sectors in the state, I think is really heartening for all of us to see how many different groups want to be involved in this. And that's really where we're at. So this webinar, as much as it was informative, is really meant to be a call to action. We are intending to build a movement here in Michigan. We are intending to make Michigan the most physically active state in the country. And it can't just be the 5 people on this screen or the couple other people that we have on our board. It needs to be absolutely all of you. So I would encourage you to engage. Go to our website, mimoves.org. Go to the Join the Movement page and fill out the form and provide us your contact information. And from there, we could talk about how you want to be involved and what you think priorities should look like. Again, this is a collective and it is a collaborative effort. The coalition is open to absolutely everyone. And so, please join the movement. Please share the movement with your colleagues and in your communities. As we've said, everyone has the opportunity to be involved in something like this. So I want to thank all of our panelists for being on here today. I want to thank the audience, and please get in touch with us so we can collectively move towards making Michigan the most physically active state in the country. Thank you.